Hello and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today's conversation I'll be talking to Mia. Mia is based in New York and she's deaf. I know a lot of you have been wondering how am I going to communicate with her, but we have a wonderful interpreter, Sabrina, who will also be joining us during this call. I'll be asking Mia about the challenges of being born deaf and being the only one in her family who is deaf. How that affected her growing up. I will also be talking to her about the challenges society presents. As you know, when you're deaf, it's an invisible illness. No one can see, no one knows you're deaf. You don't have a sign over their head saying you're deaf. So people just assume you look normal, you look well, so you don't have any challenges. She'll be talking about some of these issues she's been going through. And more exciting, she'll be talking about the creativity side of being deaf. What's happened to her. She's used this opportunity to find her joy through drawing. She's a creative artist who scribbles and draws beautiful artwork. I'm sure you could see some of them amazing pieces. But this passion, this inner burn came from her desire to separate herself from the world and go into something that was more meaningful, where she could elaborate herself in a beautiful way. She's got two beautiful daughters who are not born deaf, but help her communicate. Not everything though. Meet Mia and Sabrina, her interpreter. Hello, welcome to Painless Universal. A conversation with me and Welsh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. Likewise. Wow. How is she?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited for this interview with you. And I'm grateful for a good friend in California.
I'm grateful for you as well. Yeah.
Agreed. So, where would you like for us to start off?
We can start now. I want her to tell us.
Oh, okay, great. Um, of course, my name's Mia. My last name is Sanchez. I was born and raised in New York City, the specific area of Harlem. My grandparents moved into New York from the Caribbean islands. I am second generation American citizen. So I grew up the only deaf person in my family. My entire family is hearing. So I grew up just learning how to speak English and writing English. And I learned American Sign Language late. I actually learned sign language through an interpreter when I was a mainstream student. So I was the only deaf student. Once I went to college at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York, they both had deaf and a hearing community. That is where I grew my language and acquired more communication opportunities and socialization opportunities. And I was able to grow as a person quite a bit, became a leader, was able to discover myself as an artist. That's where I became a mom, became a world traveler. And now, of course, I have my Dame Art Studios and the purpose of creating art for the community, uh, generating support and donations or inspiring our customers through their personal experiences. Uh, we it's incredible. We're so grateful for our so-called disability. Of course, my permanent disability being deaf has been a blessing instead of a curse, and that's so it's so great.
Wow. Wow. I'm really flattered. Um, what age was she diagnosed as being deaf?
I was born hearing. My mom tells me that what may have caused I was born hearing, like I said. I was born 2 weeks after my due date. My mother had an emergency cesarean. I became very ill after my delivery and had a hospital stay. And my mom actually didn't realize it. When I was crawling, I was starting to meet milestones. And one day my mom realized that when she called me, I wasn't responding to sounds. I was not responding to her, where my brother in diapers would respond. I just didn't. And she, sure enough, took me to the doctors and they diagnosed me bilateral. Um, so both my ears, sensorineural hearing loss, which means when I was sick as an infant, it damaged the follicles in and the nerves in my cochlea. So I do not have a problem with the bone structure. I don't have a problem within my inner ear. It's just the cochlea itself is missing. So I've worn hearing aids and that's helped. It's not the best solution, but it does help improve some of my hearing. Um,
Wow.
so that's how we found out.
Well, that's really interesting. I like the fact that she talks about she found out through when the mom was calling her, because that's one of the things I'm always watchful with kids is to look at their child and keep calling their names and to actually make sure they can hear me. So I'm always cautious about that, and I'm so glad she shares her story and how her mom found out. Um, honestly, on another notice, how was it growing up being deaf? Was there pain affiliated to it, or did people understand her? What kind of school did she have to go to?
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a bit of different challenges that I've faced, even though my disability is not something that you can see, right? Um, the ability to communicate is where a lot of my challenges arose. And it was a daily thing. Communication happens 24/7, right? And it's became a 24/7 challenge, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have that barrier of communication. Even my family does not know American Sign Language. They know the basics of numbers or the alphabet and some home gestures. And but really thoroughly learning American Sign Language is not my family's language. I picked up sign language through an interpreter and meeting some other deaf people. And finally, over time, when I went to the Rochester Institute of Technology, went to college there, that's where I acquired most of my language. So I would communicate through lip reading, lots of lip reading, and it's exhausting on the eyes. So, but definitely I experienced autism, meaning the lack of accommodation to my communication needs, knowing my condition and providing access. It can happen at home and it can happen in public settings like at work or when you go into the grocery store. There's so many different places that you would face those challenging times. And sometimes it stops me. Should I just go ahead and not do it, or should I fight for my right? And sometimes we just let it go and move on and just accept it. But the most common thing at home is during the holidays when all of the family gets together. And there's usually so many people in the same room. We're all sitting at the same table. Mind you, I'm the only one that's deaf. So everyone's talking to each other. And I, of course, feel left out. Of course, I love my family and I love to be with them. And the food is always great, but deep down inside, it's something that is missing. And you get used to it over time. Or I was in a domestic violence and sexually uh,
Mm.
violent relationship. And my ex was very loud, very disturbing. And someone called the police and they showed up at my door, uh, which were two white officers. And that night I was very overwhelmed, was not thinking straight. And they came in and they didn't ask if I needed an interpreter or, let me find a female officer to help. And that was an advantage for my abusive ex. So that my story at that time was not relevant. I had a 6-month-old baby at the time, and not being able to have that communication access, that's a huge barrier, which is autism in itself.
Mm.
So my ex, knowing my disability and still sure enough going through to his advantage, right? It's some challenges are intended to be harmful and some are so unintentional, like the family or the friends or people who are just not aware, which is not their fault. And that's where sometimes the emotion comes in, correct, right? So it can turn into a psychological trauma, not necessarily a physical trauma. So communication goes a long way.
Wow. No, really, really shocking. I do understand where you're coming from because when I put you in my shoes, I'm thinking, even going shopping, you don't think about other people. You just think about your own condition. You don't think because you look well. You don't look like someone who has anything wrong with you. You just look perfect. And I would never think to myself, what is wrong with you that will be your death and that you can't hear and a fire alarm going off. You can't hear this or you just. How is your son, your child? Is he deaf as well?
I actually have two children, both girls. My oldest is 16
Mhm.
and my youngest is 3. Both are hearing and sign very well. They use ASL and English, so they're bilingual. Both of them are considered to be because they have a deaf mom. We have an acronym. It's CODA, Child of Deaf Adult. CODAs is what we call them. And they are immersed in the deaf community, the hearing community. They live with me. They see all of my customs. They see my language. They see the things that I do. And it's advantageous for me because I can teach them and I can support their language acquisition, and they help support my speech, right? My lip reading skills. So it's really nice. And um even just the one being the one deaf and hearing family, whatever my basic needs are, they will try and interpret for me. But still, I don't like to have them interpret for me for in-depth conversations or emotional. I limit that. And however, with my children, because we have the same language,
Yeah.
it is so much more in depth of a relationship that I get to have with them because they do understand me. They do understand me as their mother. So I'm so grateful for both of my kids.
That is amazing. That is truly an honor that you have kids that you can actually relate to and they're learning your world. So even when you go to your family now, you can still have conversation with your kids and some people that understand you, even though they're not hearing difficulties, but they could share that love and be part of you because you brought them up to understand you. And I'm so proud you did that. I'm so happy you made them understand you. I have to go into your artistic bits. You're an artist, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I am an artist.
How did you go find your passion of art?
Um, it started through speech therapy. I was born in the 80s. So during that time, it was very oral. Oral was the practice um, for doctors, audiologists, teachers. Um, they would tell family of deaf children, they would tell my family, you know what, it's really important for you to do this, wear hearing aids. And we used to have FM systems. It's actually a device that had a strap that strapped around your back and your shoulders, and then it had two cords that had ear you plug into your ears with earbuds and with a microphone on it, and you would put it on and you would practice, and people would talk with the microphone, and I could hear with that FM system. It almost sounded robotic, but that's another emotional, but over time technology got better and we got hearing aids instead of the big old FM system that we had to wear on our chest. So it's going through as an artist, art allowed me to release my stress, my anxieties, my constant paying attention to society, to make sure that I was involved, and my anxiousness to be able to let go and just express myself visually and through colors. Um, and when I found out about drawing and at that age, they would tell me a story and I wanted to draw pictures. It was easier for me to tell that story. And then I started to get more curious when it came to drawing and painting and using clay. And my grandmother would let me go outside in the kitchen with music and do whatever I wanted that was hands on, and that became something that became a part of me. So recently I started getting canvases and using mixed media, starting to merge poetry and art. uh, my Finding my inner self in my drawings, hearing people's stories, and creating art. So it became my communication preference, my strength.
Wow. Could you tell us what your typical painting, what does your painting signify?
Um, I noticed my paintings always have a bold colors.
Hmm.
Um, and how I choose those specific colors is not always common. For example, some people I paint blue instead of a natural skin tone. Um, and I like to play with whimsical lines. I have learned to be creative with lines to create shape or objects uh, through whimsical lines instead of straight lines, and I'm really good with that. I'm still trying to figure out my signature as an artist. I do notice that people do notice my artwork and they know it belongs to me or that it's my art. I do get constant feedback, and the biggest feedback is I use a lot of symbolism in my work. For example, one of my paintings um, was inside of a human. Of course, we always show the muscles and the face. It didn't have any skin color. There was no identifying gender or sexual identifying, and there was none of that. It was just the muscles of the face, and it was open, and then you can see the head and butterflies, monarch butterflies, the orange and black and white butterflies coming out of the head. And the symbolism in that is transformation within oneself. Do you obsess on your sadness and hold on to it, or are you looking forward to a brighter day? Are you loving, or where's your hate? So the splitting of the body shows both sides, and understanding that as one, we're all the same. We all have that human emotion.
It's amazing. She says on her Instagram page that she turns her can'ts into can, and she manages my visions into plans. Can you tell us what she means by that? Love it.
Yeah. I love quotes. I love to read books. I feel like there's a lot of hidden messaging in that we all go through. What I've learned in the psychology books that I've read, our own limitations are our mindset, and that was big for me. That impacted me quite a bit, and it's so true. If you start to accept that you cannot do certain things, or you don't want to figure out different strategies and using what you can do to be the best in those things, that is where I want to show that you cannot underestimate me. Give me the opportunity to try. And through that, and I've experienced that a lot growing up, my vision. And of course, I have a lot of my own anxieties or fears or concerns that because of the current trend, or do I start a new trend, or should I follow society's standard, or should I go ahead and stick out? I tell myself that I should do whatever I think I should do. If I imagine it and I hold on to it, I'm going to lose it if I don't use it. So that has become my life motto, and I hope my life motto will encourage other people to do the same thing.
I love that. I think that's true. We need to believe in ourselves. We change our mindsets. Like myself, living with a chronic illness myself, you would never know when you look at me that I have a blood disorder. But I had to believe in myself and turn my I can't do this, because all my life the doctors told me you can't do this, you can't do that, don't don't have kids. So I had to believe that make it. I could do this. And if I, obviously you listen to the doctor, but at the same time, you also have to listen to your body. You have to know and do what's right for you. So I did that. So I understand where you're coming from about that quote. I think it's so beautiful. What's your hope for the future? Final question. Your hope for the future for people who are deaf, and what do you want to see in the future?
Oh, that warms my heart. I want to recognize one of my business partner. I the co-founder of Dame Art Studios. She too is deaf, very well known tattoo artist. She travels the world. Uh, she's has such a beautiful heart, spending her free time uh, working with homeless people or helping stray animals or people with disabilities. And that's what chooses to do with her time. And us two together, we had the vision of our deaf community facing so many challenges finding employment or access to language. We have that problem, and that is usually something that is self-imposed, self-made. We would love to support each other in finding jobs, and our deaf ecosystem. We need to support each other and provide ways and become something that we haven't found yet. Do something that has yet to be done. and try to have that breakthrough. So between the two of us, Gail and I, her name is Gail, uh, we want to progress employment for our deaf community, or even with art, maybe we can volunteer and encourage them to find themselves and try to hit whatever goals and passions that they have for themselves and overcome any obstacles that stand in their way to really acquire the language and and have that at their fingertips. And I would love to partnership with the hearing individuals as well, because we need to, like right now, what we're doing, we need each other, for us being able to have these conversations, just a few moments of our time, hopefully educate and inspire more people to do the same.
That's very true. I agree. I reached out to you for this purpose. I was wondering myself, how would we communicate? But I said, where there's a will, where there's a will, there's a way. And we found it, we made it happen. And I hope that this video goes round
I
and
agree.
understand your challenges, and we all go from there. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any final message?
Yes, I would like to tell you, Anne, thank you. Thank you for making that difference in my life, being able to find me through whatever channels to find me. And I'm so glad that we connected. And I've done research on your website, and I thank you for all that you've done. It's beautiful, and I appreciate that I had this opportunity. So my message for everyone is to be authentic with yourself. Don't allow life and obstacles and oppression. The world today, in this pandemic, let alone, is a wake up call for us to enjoy life, do what you can, and always be nice to the next person. You never know what's going on, and their obstacles may be just as yours.
Thank you so much, Mia. And thank you, Sabrina. You're an excellent interpreter of the communication. Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Yes,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Yes, thank you, Sabrina, for facilitating that communication. Thank you. And they're hidden angels, interpreters in our deaf community, just so you know.